Alright, so I have completed all of the Japanese land movement, and I've got naval movement to finish. Now, I've moved the other Japanese task forces, but I'm going to move these on camera, so to speak, because what's going to happen is that the Chinese fleet here is going to get a chance to fire its missiles off. So I'll move this Japanese fleet first. So he's coming out of port, one here, two here, three here. And what I want to do is I want to get within one hex, which is this Japanese missile unit's range. I want to get within one hex so that when the Chinese stack here begins to move during the next Chinese naval movement, this Japanese anti-ship missile can be launched at the Chinese stack. So I could bring both of these Japanese naval units into this hex and fight it out, but the Chinese have 3 naval units in that hex, and the Japanese only have 2 naval units that can get there during the same movement. So that would leave the Japanese outgunned 3 naval units to 2. And naval combat works in such a way that you're rolling 1 die per naval unit, and you want to get the highest die roll. So the Japanese would stand a fair chance of losing that engagement. But in any case, I like this. I've taken up a blocking position. However, because the rules allow that whenever an enemy naval unit is moving within missile strike range, the opposing player can declare a temporary halt. So that's what we've done here. The Chinese player is declaring a temporary halt, and they are going to launch one of their missile units. Now, regardless of how this goes down, I'm going to do the same thing with this other Japanese naval unit up here. 1, 2, 3. So we will assume that that naval movement is occurring at the same time. But I just kind of wanted to walk you through it and show you how it was fleshing out. But the Chinese, in that case, will fire a second anti-ship missile in that hex. Now, I've got a third missile in there because I've got 3 fleets, and I really don't want to fire these anti-ship missiles off at the Japanese Navy. I was really hoping to save this for my amphibious landing, but the Japanese are kind of forcing my hand here, so I'm going to have to fire these off. Okay, so these missiles have a strike range rating of 3, and the Japanese fleet defenses will modify the Chinese strike die roll. So normally I need a 3 or less, but because the fleet defenses will add a +1 to the Chinese strike die roll, that means what I need is a 2 or less. So I'm going to go ahead and roll both dice right now. It doesn't matter which, because both all these game pieces are identical. So let's go ahead and roll some dice. Wow. All right. Well, the Chinese did it. Chinese managed to sink both of these Japanese flotillas. Well, that was a bit of luck, and that eliminates the missiles as well. So these Chinese missiles are expended, and not a good day for the Japanese Navy. The worst day for the Japanese Navy since 1942. So there you go. Chinese Navy survived that encounter, and I did have to use up 2 of my precious missiles though, and I can't replenish those until I can get these Chinese naval units into a friendly port, and then of course I have to spend replenishment points to place them back on the map. But anyway, so far the Chinese fleet has survived, and so let's go ahead and continue on with the rest of the turn. By the way, I forgot to mention, so I thought I'd kind of splice in here a comment. The Japanese naval units would have had to undergo a submarine attack as well once they completed their movement, but I didn't bother because, of course, the Chinese Navy managed to sink both the Japanese flotillas, so it was kind of irrelevant. But anyway, yeah, the Japanese are subjected to submarine attacks just like the Chinese are, and I've moved the other Japanese fleets, and they're in their positions, but we'll pick that up in just a moment. Well, the Chinese fleet is safe from any further encroachments by the Japanese Navy, so we can go ahead and move on to the land combat phase of the Japanese player turn. And as I mentioned before, we've got some combats to resolve, so let's go ahead and walk through some land combat. I've already calculated all the odds just to kind of speed things up, but we can walk through the steps here so you can see how it works. Alright, well, we've got a Chinese commando brigade here, Eagle Brigade, that was left over after having conducted a successful raid the airbase mission. But the Japanese have descended on this brigade with some mechanized divisions. We've got the 8th Mech Division and we've got the 2nd Mech Division. And these two units are going to conduct an attack against the Chinese commandos. We've also got the 112th Motorized Artillery Battalion. However, he's not going to participate in the attack, but he serves a purpose here by preventing any possible retreat. Okay, so we can see a 16 and a 14, that is going to equal a 30. So a 30 to 3, that is a 10 to 1. The combat results table only goes up to a 6 to 1. But in any case, we have to calculate possible terrain shifts. And let's not forget we've got this Patriot unit there. Alright, well, let's take a look at the terrain in the Defender's Hex. Okay, well, we've got a city, this port here, and that's going to shift the combat odds from 6 to 1 down to 5 to 1. And also, because the Japanese are attacking across the river, it doesn't matter if some Japanese units are not attacking across the river. If any attacker is crossing a river, that's going to give another column shift to the defender. So we've got the city and we've got the river. That's going to take us down from a maximum of 6 to 1 down to 4 to 1. So we have 4 to 1 odds. Alright, well, the next thing we got to do is decide whether we're going to fly in any air support. So the Japanese player definitely wants to do that. And we've got an air unit standing by up here. We're going to go ahead and fly in that air unit, and we're going to bring in an older air unit. So we've got a +3 air unit and a +1 air unit, and now what happens is that the Chinese player gets an opportunity to see if he wants to fly any air units into that combat hex. Well, this is kind of tempting because the Japanese have flown in one of their 1 quality air units, and the Chinese still have a sizable reserve of aircraft to throw in. However, we got that Patriot battery to worry about, and the Patriot battery will affect air combat, so it's kind of a risky decision. Well, all right, I think we're going to have to go for this. The Chinese have the air units to expend, so we're going to fly in 2 of our best air units, and we don't have a lot of these. In fact, there's only 1 more 3 quality air unit after this, but we're going to fly in 2 of our best air units, and we're going to brave that Patriot battery. And so what's really going on is these Japanese air units are in this hex, and the Chinese air units are now in that hex. Okay, so first thing we got to do is resolve air combat, and just like we discussed before, the Japanese are going to roll 2 dice. Alright, and there's a 9. That's a good roll. The Japanese are also going to add +1 for this air unit, so that'll bring it up to a 10, and then +3 for that air unit, that'll bring it up to a 13. In addition, there's the SAM battery to consider. So let's go ahead and roll the Chinese and see how they do. Alright, well, the Chinese rolled pretty badly. So even without the Patriot battery contributing to air combat, the Chinese have lost. So the Japanese player gets to decide which of these 2 Chinese air units are going to be eliminated. They're both 3 quality air units, so it doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead and eliminate that guy. This guy becomes flipped to his flown side, and he gets moved off the map. Basically, he's aborted, and that allows the Japanese Air Force to reign supreme over the battle. Okay, well, both of these air units are strike capable, and each air unit can shift a land combat CRT one column in the favor of the same nationality. So because we have two air units, we can shift the calculated odds of 4-to-1 against this hex up to a 5-to-1 and then up to a 6-to-1. It doesn't matter in the case of air support what the actual rating of the air unit is. All air units simply shift the odds one column in the compatriot's favor. So we've taken our 4-to-1 attack back up to a 6-to-1 attack. These air units are now also flown, and they're going to go back to base. Marked flown. And now let's go ahead and roll the land combat die, and we'll see how the Japanese do. Alright, the Japanese roll a 4. And let me consult the land combat odds, and we'll see what a 4 gets me. Alright, a die roll of 4 at a 6-to-1 odds is a defender eliminated. So this Chinese commando brigade has been wiped out, and he gets removed from the map. And now the Japanese units that won that combat, they have the option to advance after combat, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to advance this unit after combat, and the Patriot can't advance after combat, but we will advance that division after combat. So, alright, our first land combat went very well. So let's get on to our next land combat. And this one's a little different though, because we don't quite have the same combat strength to array as up here. We've got the 1st Infantry Division with a strength of 11, plus we've got the 1st Artillery Regiment with a strength of 3, so a total of 14. And then we've got the 132nd Artillery Battalion with a strength of 1. So we've got a total of 15 against a 3. So that's only a 5-to-1 to start off with. However, no one's attacking across any rivers, and there's no defensive terrain in the hex. So it's going to be a straight up 5-to-1. Alright, so once again the Japanese player is given the option to fly in air support, and he's been flying a lot of his remaining air units. He doesn't have a lot of aircraft to fly in, but I think we'll come down here and we'll collect this F-15 and we'll fly him in there. And we've got another older aircraft that we can fly in. Things are kind of getting down to the wire now. We've used a lot of our air units up to this point, so we're going to leave it at that. Now, again, the Chinese have the option to fly in air units if they want to. By the way, I forgot to mention in the last battle, the Japanese player had the option to apply a cyber war chit to that land combat, but there was no need to because he was already at a 6-to-1 odds. The Chinese player could have done the same thing. He still has a cyber war chit left, but again, that would have been a waste because it's a 6-to-1 odds, and he knew that his commando unit wasn't likely to survive in any case. So, alright, we've got 2 Japanese air units flying in to that combat, and now, once again, the Chinese player is given the option to see if he wants to intercept that. Once again, the Japanese player moved a SAM unit up nearby to make sure that he can cover this attack, and that gives the Chinese player some pause. But he still has quite a wealth of air units. Unfortunately, he lost one of his valuable +3 air units. In this case, what I think we'll do is we've got quite a stack of these +2 air units. Maybe we'll get lucky, and we'll fly in those 2 Chinese air units and see how the dice go. Okay, so Once again, we've got air combat. And just as before, we're going to roll the Japanese, and we're going to roll 1 die per air unit and add the aircraft's combat strength. The Japanese player has the option to apply a cyber war. He's not going to do that. He's basically relying on his SAM to give him the advantage. Alright, so the Japanese roll a nice average 7. Okay, so we've got a 7. This is going to make that 7 into an 8, and then the +3 will make it into an 11. So we've got a total of 11, notwithstanding the SAM unit. And let's go ahead and roll for the Chinese air units. Alright, well, the Chinese rolled a 7 as well. So guess what? The Chinese have a 7. That's going to take it up to a 9. That's going to take it up to an 11. But the SAM unit gave the Japanese the advantage. So once again, the Chinese have lost air combat. And in this case, specifically, it was the SAM that made all the difference. So the Japanese are going to choose one of the, they're both the same. The Japanese will choose one of these air units to be eliminated. So he's out. And Chinese units. And that Chinese unit is aborted. He's going to fly off map. And yet again, the Japanese reign supreme in the air. Okay, well, we had a 5-1, but now we've got 2 air units to contribute, so that'll take it up to a 6-1 and then up to a 7-1, except of course, as I mentioned, 6-1 is the maximum odds you can get. So we're just going to roll the dice at 6-1 and see how that goes. Alright, in this case, the Japanese roll a 3, which is Defender retreated. Alright, well, the Siberian Tiger Commando Brigade must retreat. However, there is no retreat path. You cannot retreat into a zone of control, and you certainly cannot retreat into an enemy occupied hex. So because this unit is unable to retreat, he is eliminated. So these Chinese commando units are not, they're not able to stand up to full-blown military divisions. Alright, so the Japanese units, the air units are flown, and we're not going to be able to do that too many more times because we are literally running out of air units. So, okay. Nevertheless, that was a good showing for the Japanese Air Force, and the Chinese probably should not have, well, the dice can go either way, so there's really no right or wrong answer, and as I said, the Chinese have quite a few area units, so they can take a couple hits like that. Later on in the game, as air losses begin to mount, these kinds of decisions become much more critical, however. Alright, so let's go ahead and resolve this air combat, this land combat rather. So we've got a total of 26 to 3, so that's going to max us out at 6-1 odds. Once again, the Japanese player is given the option to fly in air support. In this case, he's going to fly in one of his +4 air units. And way up north, I actually have another air unit I can throw in. Alright, so this time, however, the Chinese are going to decline to fly into that hex, so that means the Japanese will automatically prevail, and they're maxed out on the odds anyway. So all we got to do is roll the die and see how that goes. We rolled a 3. That's another Defender retreat. Oscar Brigade is unable to retreat, so he's eliminated. And there we go, another victory for the Japanese.